Have you ever met someone who looked completely ordinary, but carried a past so powerful that it could silence an entire room? What if the quietest person in a military training center turned out to know more about saving lives than anyone expected? Before we begin, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who loves inspiring real lifestyle stories. Your support helps us bring more unforgettable stories every week. Everyone in the training center believed they already knew who would succeed. The loud ones believed they were born to lead. The confident ones believed they would always be first. The experienced ones believed they had already seen everything. But none of them noticed the quiet young woman standing near the back of the line. Her name was Emma Carter. She came from a small ranch in Montana, where life was simple but never easy. She did not speak much. She never tried to impress anyone. She simply watched, listened, and waited. Many people thought she looked nervous. She was not. She was simply paying attention. The Military Medical Training Center stood just outside a rainy town surrounded by forests and mountains. Every morning, dozens of new medical trainees arrived hoping to become lifesavers for the Army. Some had worked as EMTs. Some had nursing experience. Others had military backgrounds. Everyone wanted to prove they deserved to be there. Emma wanted only one thing: to become better than she was yesterday. As the trainees stood in perfect lines, the chief instructor entered the room. His name was Staff Sergeant Daniel Brooks. He was respected by everyone, not because he shouted, but because every word he spoke carried meaning. He stopped in front of the class and looked at every face. I don't care where you came from. I don't care how smart you think you are. And I definitely don't care how many action movies you've watched. A few trainees laughed. He didn't. The laughter disappeared immediately. You are here for one reason: to learn how to keep people alive. If you cannot do that, nothing else matters. The room became silent. He pointed toward several medical stations filled with equipment: tourniquets, bandages, chest seals, airway tools, splints, trauma kits. Everything was perfectly organized. Today, he continued, everyone starts with the basics. You'll learn bleeding control. You'll learn airway management. And you'll repeat every drill until your hands know what to do without your brain telling them. Everyone nodded. Emma quietly studied the equipment. Something caught her attention. Inside a locked glass cabinet sat several advanced combat trauma kits. Most trainees never looked at them. Emma did. She noticed the supplies inside were arranged for display, not for speed. Someone had packed them beautifully, but not practically. She remembered something her grandfather had told her years ago. If your hands waste even 3 seconds searching for equipment, someone might lose their life. Those words had stayed with her forever. Without thinking, Emma slowly raised her hand. The entire room noticed. Staff Sergeant Brooks looked directly at her. Yes. I have a request, Staff Sergeant. What request? I'd like permission to begin training with the advanced trauma kit. The room became completely silent. For a moment, no one moved. Then laughter broke out from several trainees. Standing near the observation platform was Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, one of the younger officers responsible for evaluating new recruits. He smiled, then laughed openly. You want the advanced trauma kit? He walked closer. Interesting. So tell us, how much battlefield experience does a ranch girl have? More trainees laughed. Emma remained perfectly calm. I've treated emergencies before. Ryan folded his arms. What kind? Cows? Horses? Maybe a scratch cowboy? More laughter filled the room. Emma looked directly at him. Sometimes animals. Sometimes people. Her answer wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was simply honest. That somehow made the room even quieter. Ryan smirked. And who exactly taught you all this? My grandfather. He laughed again. Of course. Every hero starts with a magical grandfather. Several trainees joined him. Staff Sergeant Brooks watched Emma carefully. Unlike everyone else, she never reacted. She never became embarrassed. She never argued. She simply waited. Brooks finally asked, "Why do you think you're ready?" Emma answered without hesitation. Because I know how important those tools become when seconds matter. Brooks looked toward the cabinet, then back at Emma. Finally he sighed. You get one chance. If you fail, you go back to beginner training. No complaints. No excuses. Emma nodded. Yes, Staff Sergeant. The cabinet unlocked with a loud click. Brooks placed the heavy trauma kit on the table. Open it. Every trainee watched. Emma slowly unzipped the bag. She didn't dump everything onto the table. Instead, she opened each section carefully. Tourniquet, test cell, airway kit, bandages, medical gloves, emergency blanket. She touched every item only once, then quietly moved the chest seal into another pocket. Brooks noticed immediately. Why did you move that? It saves time. He raised an eyebrow. Explain. If someone reaches for it during stress, they'll find it faster here. Brooks didn't answer, but he remembered the change. Lieutenant Ryan looked annoyed. He expected her to panic. Instead, she looked completely comfortable. Brooks called 2 assistants. They rolled out a realistic trauma mannequin connected to bleeding systems and medical monitors. Artificial blood slowly poured from a deep wound in its leg. The monitor showed unstable breathing. The airway appeared blocked. Brooks crossed his arms. Scenario begins now. You have 3 minutes. Save him. The timer started. Most trainees expected Emma to attack the bleeding first. Instead, she knelt beside the mannequin and immediately checked the airway. Several trainees looked confused. Ryan spoke loudly. Wrong priority. Emma ignored him. She repositioned the head. Checked breathing. Listened carefully. Only after confirming the airway did she move toward the bleeding wound. She placed direct pressure. Applied the tourniquet high above the injury. Pulled until the bleeding stopped. Marked the application time. Everything happened smoothly. Without panic. Without rushing. She checked breathing again. Then covered the patient to prevent shock. The monitor slowly stabilized. Staff Sergeant Brooks looked at the timer. 1 minute. 38 seconds. She still had over a minute remaining. The scenario ended. The mannequin survived. Nobody spoke. Brooks stepped closer. He carefully inspected every step. Everything had been done correctly. Nothing unnecessary. Nothing forgotten. He looked at Emma. Who taught you airway management? My grandfather. The tourniquet? My grandfather. The trauma sequence? My grandfather. Lieutenant Ryan laughed softly. What exactly was your grandfather? Emma answered quietly. A rancher. Ryan smiled sarcastically. Funny. Most ranchers don't teach battlefield medicine. Emma finally looked directly into his eyes. Maybe yours didn't. The room froze. Nobody laughed. Even Brooks nearly smiled. But he hid it. He turned toward the class. Everyone back to your stations. No one copies what they just saw. You haven't earned that yet. Training continued. Emma quietly repacked the trauma kit exactly as she found it. Brooks stayed beside her. You changed my equipment. Yes, Staff Sergeant. You always rearrange other people's supplies? No. Then why today? Because someone under pressure won't care how neat it looks. They'll only care how quickly they can save someone. Brooks looked at her for several seconds, then said only one sentence. Details save lives. Emma nodded. Yes, Staff Sergeant. The rest of the day passed with basic medical drills. Most trainees repeated simple exercises. Applying pressure bandages. Moving patients. Opening airways. Practicing emergency responses. Emma completed every task quietly. She never showed off. She never corrected anyone. She only focused on doing each step correctly. Still, people couldn't stop watching her. Some admired her. Others disliked her. Many simply didn't understand her. During lunch, Emma sat alone near a rainy window. The cafeteria smelled of coffee and fresh bread. Most trainees formed groups. Emma preferred silence. A young woman carrying a food tray walked over. Mind if I sit here? Emma smiled politely. Go ahead. I'm Oliverite. Emma Carter. I know. Emma looked surprised. Everyone's talking about you. Emma sighed softly. I figured. Olivia laughed. They've already given you a nickname. Emma looked up. What is it? The ranch medic. Emma smiled for the first time that day. I've been called worse. Olivia studied her. I worked as a city paramedic before joining. I've seen talented people. But you're different. Emma looked curious. Different how? You don't chase emergencies. You let the emergency tell you what's important. Emma stopped eating. Those words sounded familiar. Very familiar. Years ago. Her grandfather had said almost the same thing. Don't chase the blood. Find the life. Emma looked out the rainy window. She could almost hear his voice again. Olivia noticed. You really learned everything from your grandfather? Emma nodded slowly. He never wasted words. He only taught lessons. What kind of lessons? Emma smiled softly. He always said, slow hands create mistakes. But calm hands save lives. Olivia nodded. I'd like to meet him someday. Emma looked down at her tray. You can't. He passed away 3 years ago. Olivia's smile faded. I'm sorry. Emma gave a small nod. He left me everything that mattered. Neither of them noticed Lieutenant Ryan watching from across the cafeteria. His smile had disappeared. Something about Emma bothered him. Not because she embarrassed him, but because she never tried to. People like Ryan understood competition. They understood confidence. They understood ego. But they didn't understand quiet strength. And that made Emma impossible to read. Before the afternoon training began, Staff Sergeant Brooks gathered everyone again. Today's final drills would test teamwork. Nobody realized that within the next 24 hours, a routine exercise would turn into a real emergency, and the quiet ranch girl everyone laughed at would soon face the biggest test of her life. Emma followed Staff Sergeant Brooks into the medical building after the emergency was over. The long hallway was quiet, but everyone they passed seemed to be looking at her. Some trainees whispered. Others simply stared. No one was laughing anymore. Olivia walked beside Emma until they reached the office door. You did something incredible today, Olivia said quietly. Emma shook her head. I just did what anyone should have done. Olivia smiled. No. You did what everyone else failed to notice. Staff Sergeant Brooks opened the office door. Emma. Inside. She stepped into the small office. It wasn't impressive. Just a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a window looking toward the ambulance yard where the rain still fell steadily. Brooks remained standing. Across the room sat Captain Victoria Hayes, the officer responsible for medical training across the entire center. Beside her sat Major Nathan Cross, a quiet man with sharp eyes who hadn't spoken a single word since Emma entered. Captain Hayes looked at Emma for several seconds before speaking. Sit down. Emma obeyed. Hayes pressed a button on a tablet. A video began playing. It showed the emergency from only a few minutes earlier. Emma watched herself running across the yard. She watched herself kneel beside the collapsed worker. She watched herself checking his breathing before anyone else even realized the situation was real. The video stopped. Captain Hayes looked at Emma. What made you move? Emma answered honestly. He wasn't falling. He was collapsing. Hayes nodded. Explain. People who trip try to catch themselves. He didn't. His right hand opened before he hit the ground. He couldn't control it. Major Cross finally looked up from his notebook. You noticed that from 20 meters away? Emma nodded. Yes, sir. Anything else? His skin. What about it? It looked gray. And he was sweating even though the weather was cold. Captain Hayes exchanged a quick glance with Major Cross. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally Hayes asked, where did you learn to observe people like that? Emma smiled softly. My grandfather. Again. The same answer. Major Cross closed his notebook. What was his name? William Carter. Occupation. He owned a ranch. Cross nodded slowly. A rancher. Yes, sir. Captain Hayes leaned forward. Did your grandfather ever serve in the military? Emma blinked. I don't know. You never asked? He didn't talk much about his younger years. What did he teach you? Emma thought for a moment. He taught me to watch. Watch what? Everything. She looked toward the window. He always said, people tell stories, but bodies tell the truth. The room became quiet. Major Cross slowly opened another folder lying on the desk. Inside were several printed reports from today's emergency. Every report praised Emma's decisions. Every report mentioned the same thing. Excellent observation. Calm under pressure. Correct medical priorities. Captain Hayes folded her hands. The civilian worker is alive. Emma let out a slow breath she didn't realize she had been holding. That's good. The doctors believe early treatment gave him a much better chance. Emma smiled. Then the team did well. Hayes looked surprised. You keep saying the team. You were first. Emma answered quietly. No one saves lives alone. Major Cross watched her carefully. There was something different about this young woman. Most trainees wanted recognition. She seemed uncomfortable receiving it. Brooks finally spoke. I've trained soldiers for nearly 20 years. I've seen confident people. I've seen talented people. But I've never seen someone your age remain this calm. Emma lowered her eyes. My grandfather never allowed panic. What happened if you panicked? Emma smiled slightly. He'd hand me another job. Captain Hayes laughed softly. Another job? He believed busy hands made fear disappear. Major Cross stood. He walked toward the window. Without turning around, he asked, did your grandfather leave you anything? Emma looked surprised. A notebook. What kind? He wrote short lessons. You still have it? Yes. Cross slowly turned around. I'd like you to bring it tomorrow. Emma hesitated. It's personal. I understand. I'm not asking to keep it. I only want to see it. Emma nodded politely. I'll think about it. Cross didn't argue. Instead, he simply closed the folder. You may go. Emma stood. Just before reaching the door, Captain Hayes spoke again. Emma. She turned. You have no idea how unusual today was. Emma looked confused. Mung. Hayes smiled. Neither do we. Emma left the office. The hallway felt strangely quiet. Outside, the rain had almost stopped. Olivia was waiting. What happened? They asked about my grandfather. Olivia looked surprised. Why? I don't know. The two women slowly walked back toward the barracks. Neither noticed Major Cross watching from the office window. A few moments later, Captain Hayes closed the door. Cross opened another file. This one looked much older. The pages were yellow. Several names had been blacked out. One photograph remained. 6 military medics stood together beside a transport aircraft. One face had been circled years ago. Major Cross stared at it, then quietly whispered, William Carter. So it really is you. Captain Hayes looked up immediately. You found something? Cross nodded. I think Emma's grandfather wasn't just a rancher. He was hiding an entire life. Hayes slowly closed the file. If you're right. This is much bigger than a training center. Outside, Emma sat alone on a bench as the evening sun finally broke through the clouds. She opened the small notebook her grandfather had given her years ago. Most pages contained simple ranch notes, fence repairs, weather records, animal medicine. But near the back, one sentence was written alone. Quiet hands save more lives than loud voices ever will. Emma gently smiled. She whispered, I finally understand what you meant. She closed the notebook. Without realizing it, the answer she had searched for all her life were about to find her. The next morning, something felt different. Nobody could explain it. The instructors spoke a little more carefully. The officers seemed unusually serious. Even Lieutenant Ryan Collins looked distracted. Emily noticed all of it. Her grandfather had once told her, when experienced people suddenly become quiet, something important is happening. She never forgot those words. Training continued as usual. Or at least, it looked that way. Instructor Brooks gathered everyone inside another simulation room. This exercise is about teamwork, he announced. You'll receive confusing information. You'll hear different orders. You'll have limited supplies. Your responsibility is simple. Protect your patient. Emily stood with Sarah, Kevin, and David. Lieutenant Collins walked to the center of the room. This time, he said, Emily will lead. Several trainees looked surprised. Emily remained calm. Collins continued. Let's see whether natural talent still works when pressure becomes real. Instructor Brooks glanced toward Collins, but said nothing. The simulation began. Smoke slowly filled the room. Warning alarms echoed from hidden speakers. 3 injured victims lay across the floor. One cried loudly. Another remained unconscious. A third appeared trapped beneath broken equipment. Emily looked around carefully. She didn't rush. She studied everything first. Sarah whispered, "What do we do?" Emily answered quietly, "We observe." Kevin looked confused. "We're losing time." Emily slowly shook her head. "We're gaining information." She walked toward the unconscious victim. Checked breathing, pulse, airway. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. She frowned. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, she smelled something strange. Not smoke. Something else. A sweet chemical odor. Very faint. Emily looked toward the ceiling ventilation system. The airflow felt stronger than expected. She immediately remembered something her grandfather once taught her. Sometimes danger cannot be seen. She looked back at Sarah. Take 3 steps backward. Sarah obeyed immediately. Kevin frowned. Why? Emily answered. Do you smell that? Kevin inhaled deeply. At first, nothing. Then, his expression changed. I smell it. David noticed it too. Lieutenant Collins spoke through the room's speaker. Continue treating your casualties. Emily ignored the order. Instead, she raised her voice. Real emergency. The room became silent. Instructor Brooks immediately looked toward the observation room. Emily spoke again. Stop the exercise. Several trainees looked confused. Collins answered through the speaker. The scenario is still active. Emily didn't move. This isn't part of the scenario. Instructor Brooks immediately entered the room. What did you find? Emily pointed toward the air vent. Chemical smell. Brooks took one breath. His expression changed instantly. He smelled it too. Everyone evacuate. The exercise stopped immediately. Within seconds, trainees began leaving the room. Then someone started coughing. Another trainee rubbed burning eyes. One instructor suddenly felt dizzy. The training exercise had accidentally become a real hazardous exposure. Emergency alarms replaced the training alarms. Medical teams rushed inside. Ventilation shut down. Doors automatically sealed. Everyone moved quickly. Emily remained calm. She directed coughing trainees toward fresh air, separated those with symptoms, kept others away from the contaminated area. Nobody officially asked her to lead, yet everyone naturally followed her instructions, including Lieutenant Collins. For the first time since training began, he listened without arguing. Several minutes later, emergency response teams confirmed Emily had been right. A cleaning chemical had accidentally mixed with another solution. Dangerous fumes had spread into the simulation room. If trainees had remained inside only a few minutes longer, several could have become seriously ill. Captain Laura Hayes arrived immediately. Major Nathan Reed stood beside her. Both silently watched Emily helping frightened trainees. Neither interrupted. Neither looked surprised anymore. Instead, they exchanged a quiet glance, as if confirming something. Hours later, the exposure had been controlled. Everyone was safe. Training officially ended for the day. Emily sat quietly outside the medical building. Rain gently fell across the empty parking area. Sarah joined her carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Emily. You okay? Emily smiled softly. I think so. Sarah looked at her. You've saved people twice already. Emily stared at the rain. I just noticed things. Sarah shook her head. No. You noticed what everyone else missed. Emily remained silent. Sarah finally asked the question that had been growing inside her mind. Emily, who exactly was your grandfather? Emily slowly looked down at her coffee. I don't know anymore. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? Emily sighed. When I was little, I thought he was just a rancher. He fixed fences, raised horses, helped neighbors. But, she paused. He somehow knew things nobody around us knew. Sarah listened carefully. He always carried medical bags. Not first aid kits. Real emergency equipment. Everywhere. One inside his truck. One inside the barn. One near the kitchen. Sarah looked surprised. Why? Emily slowly smiled. He always said, emergencies never make appointments. Sarah laughed quietly. I like that. Emily nodded. So did I. Across the base, Major Nathan Reed entered a secure office. He closed the door, placed several files on the table. Captain Hayes followed. So, she asked. Reed slowly opened one folder. I found something. Captain Hayes sat down. The military database finally answered. And, it wasn't supposed to. She frowned. What does that mean? Reed placed one old photograph onto the table. 6 military medics stood beside a transport aircraft. Their uniforms carried no visible unit markings. One young man stood near the back. Captain Hayes looked closer. Who's that? Reed pointed. Thomas Carter, Emily's grandfather. Captain Hayes looked surprised. He was military. Reed nodded slowly. But not ordinary military. He opened another document. Almost every line had been blacked out. Only one sentence remained visible. Medical Operations Division. Status: permanently classified. Captain Hayes leaned forward. What kind of medical division? Reed slowly shook his head. I don't know. And that's what worries me. Before either officer could continue, the office phone rang. Reed answered. Major Reed. A calm female voice replied. Do not request any more information regarding Thomas Carter. Reed immediately straightened. Who is this? There was a brief silence. Then the woman answered. Major General Evelyn Marshall. Both officers instantly stood. The general continued. I'll arrive tomorrow morning. Until then, treat Emily Carter like every other trainee. Captain Hayes finally spoke. General. Is she in danger? Another short pause. Then came the answer. No. But history has finally found her. The line disconnected. Neither officer spoke. Captain Hayes slowly looked toward the old photograph. The rancher. Major Reed nodded. Was never just a rancher. The following morning, everything appeared normal, at least on the surface. The trainees assembled outside. Emily noticed several unfamiliar military vehicles parked near headquarters. Black SUVs. Military police. Senior officers walking quickly. Something important was happening. Sarah whispered. Big inspection today? Emily quietly answered. I don't think so. Instructor Brooks approached. Everyone inside. Training continued. Or at least, it tried to. Emily couldn't ignore the strange feeling growing inside her. During lunch, she saw Lieutenant Collins speaking nervously with Captain Hayes. Collins looked worried. Not angry. Not confident. Worried. That was new. Later that afternoon, a military convoy finally entered the base. Every instructor immediately stood straighter. Several officers saluted. A woman stepped out of the lead vehicle. Silver hair. Calm face. Sharp eyes. 2 stars decorated her uniform. Major General Evelyn Marshall. Nobody announced her. Nobody needed to. Authorities surrounded her naturally. She quietly walked through the medical building, speaking to no one, looking at everything. Finally, she entered the medical treatment area where Emily happened to be helping clean equipment after training. Emily looked up. The general stopped walking. For several long seconds, neither woman spoke. A nearby medic accidentally pulled back the sleeve of Emily's uniform. while checking for irritation from the previous day's chemical exposure. Her old shoulder scar became visible. The general's eyes immediately locked onto it. She slowly stepped closer. Not to Emily's face. To the scar. She stared silently, almost as if recognizing it. Emily looked confused. "Mom?" The general quietly asked. "Who treated that wound?" Emily answered honestly. "My grandfather." The general didn't blink. "What was his name?" "Thomas Carter." Silence filled the room. Several nearby officers exchanged nervous looks. The general stepped even closer. Her voice became almost a whisper. "He stitched this himself." Emily nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The general carefully studied the scar again. Then she noticed something almost invisible beside it. A tiny faded mark. One Emily had stopped noticing years ago. The general inhaled slowly. Her calm expression disappeared for the first time. She looked directly into Emily's eyes. Then quietly said the words that changed everything. "No." Emily frowned. "Mom." The general spoke again. "He didn't simply save your life. He left you a message." Every person inside the room became completely silent. No one understood what she meant. Not even Emily. But one thing had become painfully clear. The quiet ranch girl had never been ordinary. And whatever secret her grandfather carried for decades, it was finally about to be revealed. The room remained completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Emily looked from the general to the old scar on her shoulder. For years it had been nothing more than a childhood memory. A pain fut l'accident. 7 stitches. A story she thought she already understood. Now, everything felt different. Emily finally spoke. "A message?" Major General Evelyn Marshall nodded slowly. "Yes." She stepped closer. "I've only seen that stitching pattern twice in my entire career." Emily frowned. "My grandfather always stitched wounds that way." The general gently shook her head. "No. He stitched your wound that way. There is a difference." Emily looked confused. "I don't understand." The general looked around the room. Everyone except Instructor Brooks stays outside. No one argued. Within seconds the room emptied. Lieutenant Ryan Collins quietly left without saying a word. Sarah glanced at Emily before walking away. She wanted answers too. The door closed. Only Emily. Instructor Brooks. And the general remained. The general slowly sat down. Then looked directly at Emily. "Your grandfather wasn't preparing you to become famous. He wasn't preparing you for war. He was preparing you to save lives." Emily's eyes filled with emotion. "But why didn't he ever tell me who he really was?" The general smiled sadly. "Because he promised. And some promises are heavier than metals." Emily looked down. She remembered countless nights on the ranch. Her grandfather cleaning old medical bags, replacing bandages before they expired, sharpening medical scissors, checking flashlights, preparing equipment nobody else ever used. Back then, she thought it was simply one of his habits. Now, every memory carried a different meaning. The general continued. "Thomas Carter belonged to one of the most respected medical response teams this country ever had. They were sent where hospitals couldn't go. They worked during disasters, secret rescue missions, natural catastrophes, military operations. They saved thousands. And almost nobody knows their names." Emily whispered. "He never talked about any of that." "No, he couldn't." Instructor Brooks finally spoke. "I've trained medics for over 20 years. I've never seen instincts like hers." The general nodded. "I expected that." Emily looked surprised. "You expected me?" The general smiled gently. "Years ago, your grandfather made one request." Emily stared. "What request?" "If his granddaughter ever chose medicine, someone should quietly watch over her." Emily felt tears forming. "He knew?" The general nodded. "He believed one day you'd choose this path yourself. He never wanted anyone forcing you." Emily smiled through her tears. "That sounds exactly like him." The general reached into her briefcase. She removed a small sealed envelope, yellow with age. Emily looked at it carefully. My grandfather wrote that? Yes. He left it years ago. With one instruction. The general handed it over. It could only be given to you after you proved you would always put patients before yourself. Emily's hands trembled as she carefully opened the envelope. Inside, only one folded page. Simple handwriting. The handwriting she recognized immediately. Her grandfather's. She slowly unfolded it. The room became completely silent. She began reading. Emily, if you're holding this letter, then you chose kindness over comfort. You chose responsibility instead of recognition. That means I was right to stay silent. Emily wiped away tears. She continued reading. People may someday tell you I was brave. Don't believe them. I was simply surrounded by people who needed help. Real courage isn't being fearless. Real courage is helping even while you're afraid. Emily's breathing became unsteady. The general quietly looked away, giving her privacy. The letter continued. I never wanted you to become another version of me. I wanted you to become a better version of yourself. Learn new things. Question everything. Protect your patients. Protect your team. And never let pride make decisions your heart should make. Emily smiled through tears. Those sounded exactly like him. Then she reached the final paragraph. One day, people may finally learn my story. If that happens, remember something important. They don't need another hero. They need another good human being. Be that person. I'm already proud of you, Grandpa. Emily quietly folded the letter. She couldn't speak. Neither could anyone else. After several minutes, the general finally broke the silence. He never asked for awards. He never asked for recognition. He only wanted people to live. Emily looked toward the window. Rain still covered the outside world. Just like the first day she arrived. She suddenly remembered something. One winter evening, she had asked her grandfather why he always carried medical bags. He smiled and answered, because emergencies don't wait until you're ready. At the time, she thought it was only another lesson. Now, she realized, it had been his entire life. A week later, graduation day finally arrived. Families filled the auditorium. New military medics stood proudly in perfect uniforms. Instructor Brooks stepped onto the stage. He looked across every graduate, then spoke. Every class has strong students. Every class has smart students. But sometimes, a class gives us someone who reminds us why this profession exists. He looked toward Emily. Today, I'd like to recognize trainee Emily Carter. The room erupted into applause. Emily slowly walked onto the stage. She looked uncomfortable with the attention, exactly as her grandfather would have expected. Instructor Brooks handed her a certificate, then quietly whispered, "Your grandfather would be smiling." Emily smiled. "I hope so." Nearby, Lieutenant Ryan Collins watched everything silently. After the ceremony ended, he walked toward Emily. She expected another sarcastic comment. Instead, he stopped in front of her. "I owe you an apology." Emily looked surprised. He continued, "I judged you before I knew you. I confused confidence with ability. I was wrong." Emily smiled kindly. "We all make mistakes." Collins nodded. "The difference is, you never let yours become someone else's problem." For the first time, they shook hands. Not as rivals, as colleagues. Sarah joined them moments later. "So, what's next?" Emily looked toward the sky. Clouds were finally beginning to break apart. Sunlight slowly appeared. "I keep learning." Sarah laughed. "That's it." Emily smiled. "My grandfather always said, the day you think you've learned everything, someone gets hurt." Everyone laughed softly. Months passed. Emily became one of the most respected medics in her unit. Not because she was the fastest. Not because she was the smartest. Because people trusted her. She listened. She stayed calm. She never ignored quiet patience. She never rushed difficult decisions. She remembered every lesson her grandfather had ever taught her. One afternoon, she visited the old ranch. Everything looked smaller than she remembered. The wooden fence, the old barn, the porch swing. She slowly walked inside the house. Most things remained exactly where her grandfather had left them. His favorite coffee mug, his old hat, the medical bag beside the kitchen door. Emily picked it up. It still felt familiar. Inside, everything remained perfectly organized. Fresh bandages, carefully folded gloves, medical scissors polished until they shined. Nothing had changed. She smiled. You really were always ready. She quietly placed the bag back exactly where it belonged, then walked outside. Standing beside her grandfather's grave, she placed the old letter beneath a small stone. I understand now. The wind gently moved across the fields. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. For the first time in many years, Emily didn't feel like she had lost someone. She felt like she had finally found him. Not through secret military files. Not through hidden records. Not through forgotten history. But through every life she would save. Because his greatest legacy was never a classified mission. It was the kindness he quietly passed to one little girl who grew into an extraordinary medic. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy anyone can leave behind. Thank you so much for watching this story until the very end.